You have 77 counties in Oklahoma. I can put reports in them in 66 counties.
911, what are you reporting?
We got someone or something crawling around out here.
Did you see what it was?
I'd say it was a person, somebody really big. But he's all in black.
Welcome back to Squatch Ranger Files, Episode 3, The Boy, the Soldier, and the Hunter. I've got 3 more stories to share with you all. And I want to say, before we begin the show, I've really enjoyed getting to know a lot of new people through Facebook Bigfoot groups. I've been networking and getting to know a lot of you. I enjoy your positive feedback and everything you've added to the show. Thank you for your encounter stories. Don't forget, if you have your own encounter story, please send it in, submit it to me, to the email squatchranger@gmail.com. It's scrolling across your screen right now. We'd love to hear from you and hear your Bigfoot story. I'm still trying to get in touch with some Bigfooters or Bigfoot researchers through the Claremore area. I would really like to hear some stories from the Claremore area. So, if you're listening and you're out there, please submit a Claremore Bigfoot account to squatchranger@gmail.com. Now, on for the show. Number 1. Blue Lake, Eufaula Bigfoot in McIntosh County. My encounter happened in the Eufaula area off of Texana Road in between Sandy Bass Bay and McGee Creek, on top of the hill near Lindsay Chapel Baptist Church during the 80s, 85 or 86, because I was 11 years old. Me and my brother, he was 13 at the time, were building a deer stand at the edge of a shell pit, up in a tree all day. We started hearing strange noises and grunts about 2 hours till dark. We thought it was our friends that lived about 1/4 of a mile away trying to scare us. We yelled, "Rocky, Brian, we know that's y'all," and no one came out, so we went about our building. We had driven our tractor/lawnmower with a trailer to carry the wood. It was parked on the gravel road, which is paved now, at the top of the hill. When we were done, we had to load the remainder of the lumber that we didn't use onto our trailer. I was standing in the road, and I had a strange feeling and looked up. There it was, about 70 feet away from us, standing in the road, facing us with its arms held out from its sides, just enough to see its very long and very fine hair blowing in the light breeze. From the location he was standing in relation to us, his backdrop was a blue Lake Eufaula. It was just dark enough to where we could not make out facial features, but he was tall and hairy. Me and my brother argued for a moment about what beast exactly was standing in the road staring at us while we stared at it. At the time, the only thing I knew about Bigfoot is that my mom told me there was no such thing. So as an 11-year-old, I am searching my head for what this could be. So I say, "It's a gorilla." It is standing completely upright, though, but it is the only thing remotely even close to what I am looking at to an 11-year-old me. My brother says, "That ain't no gorilla. That's a Bigfoot." It was shortly after that when it took a step towards us. We didn't give time for his foot to hit the ground before we turned tail and ran as fast as I ever have in all my life. And we turned and bolted down the hill and stopped a car. The girl in the car was nice and talked with us to calm us down for about 25 minutes before she drove us up the hill to our tractor and followed us home. We didn't see him anymore after that. It took us about 6 months before we built up the courage to go camping again, but we never saw it again after that day. Number 2. Submitted by the Southwestern Oklahoma and North Texas Bigfoot Investigations Facebook page. Go ahead and visit their page and give them a like. Fort Sill LMTV sighting in Comanche County. I was in the Army at Fort Sill, and it was about 2012. It was the summertime. I believe it was around July, and at that time, Oklahoma was in the middle of a heat wave and a drought. The drought was so bad that most of the ponds on post had gone dry, and the wildlife were dying in great numbers. There were massive elk herds that were hardly anything but skin and bones looking for water. About the only pond that still had water in it was almost on post. I worked as a unit supply specialist, and it was one of my duties to provide food transportation when we were in the field on a FTX. One night, me and my TC, fellow driver in the truck, were taking the food back to the DFAC after everyone ate. It was late at night, around 10 p.m., and we were almost to Moway Road, coming back from the training site. As I was driving, my TC was asleep. Just within the reach of my headlights, an animal that was just as tall as my truck. I was driving an LMTV, ran across the road. I was going around 45 miles per hour, and it crossed in about 2 to 3 steps. The area it was coming from was the pond that had the last of the water in it. It was tall and skinny, as most animals were skinny that year. It had long hair hanging down and was silver and light brown. It seemed to have long hair on its arms, and its back that seemed to be way longer than the rest of the animal. I slammed on the brakes and sent my buddy flying up against the dash. He didn't have his seatbelt on. And I just sat there. My heart was pounding, and my buddy asked what had happened, and I didn't know what to say. I told him it was a deer I almost hit. He didn't see anything. If anyone knows how tall an LMTV is, it is around 12 feet, I would guess, and it was about as tall as that. I would guess around 10 feet from how far it was out. It ran on 2 legs, and I could see its arms move like someone running. It went over the 2 lanes and both shoulders in about 2 to 3 steps and was gone. I don't think I looked out the window for it. I don't think I could have seen anything anyways, because it was up armored, and the lights on the inside would have made it nearly impossible. But as I said, I think I was in shock at what I had seen, that I didn't even look, but just looked out into the darkness, trying to comprehend what I just witnessed. I was the only one who had seen it, but there are reports from Fort Sill of people seeing them. Number 3. The following is a BFRO investigative report. Hunters experience possible vocals, find nests, get screamed at over 3-day hunting weekend north of Raiden. Fall 1983 in Roger Mills County. The night before opening day of bow season, I arrived in the camp at approximately 4:30 p.m. I began clearing an area to set up base camp for a total of 3 hunters who were joining me. I had been clearing out the area of Johnson grass for about 15 minutes when I heard large impact sounds approximately 25 feet to the north of me. It was way too heavy to be a deer. I stood there and heard 3 large impacts with a second or so in between sounds. The grass and trees were too thick to see any movement. I continued to work on base camp. I had forgotten my axe. and had begun breaking wood over wood for the campfire. When I started hearing rustling in the brush, again to the north of me, I also noticed movement south of me. This movement was different, and I thought it was possibly deer. 3 to 5 minutes later, I began having the feeling of being watched, and it was starting to get dark. I made a fire and waited for the other 2 men to arrive. My friend, I'll call him RL, arrived around 8 p.m. We were sitting around the fire, and I noticed RL kept looking behind him and seemed uneasy. I asked him what was wrong. He said he had a feeling we are being watched. I had not said anything to him about the events of the evening. I told him that I had a creepy feeling of being watched for over 3 hours. I was glad to have him validate what I had been feeling. The other hunter, MR, arrived around 8:30 p.m. While we were sitting around the campfire, we smelled a dirty, sweaty, skunkish smell that came and went. It seemed to emanate from the south. We called it a night. MR and I went in the camper. RL relieved himself in the woods, and when he came back into the camper, he was white as a sheet and had a shocked look on his face. I asked him what was the matter, and he said he'd seen eye shine. I didn't understand what the problem was and replied that it was probably deer. He said, "No, you don't understand. It's not deer eye shine I saw. It was large, red, and taller than me." I asked him about the possibility that it could have been a deer standing on a berm, and he said no, it was all flat river bottom. The next morning, while I was in my tree stand, I heard 3 wood knocks to my west. About 5 minutes later, I heard really loud, like a small caliber rifle going off. Tree snap, then the sound of splintering wood, like a branch was being ripped off. We met at base camp after the morning hunt, and RL was upset because he heard people talking down his deer trail. He couldn't understand what they were saying. He also heard a whistle. Late morning, the 3 of us were stalk hunting, and I noticed something odd. I observed 3 red cedars that were bent over at the 8 to 10 foot level, all pointing to the northwest. No other cedars in the area looked like these. The next thing I ran across was something that looked like a nest made of small tree branches, 9 feet long and 6 or 7 feet wide, piled knee-high on me. This nest-like thing was underneath a hardwood tree. Beside the nest were 2 little shelters that were pup tent shaped. One was 3 foot long, the other was 5 foot long, and they were about 2.5 feet tall. The grass had grown back through the bottom of them, and the leaves were dried out. It looked like whatever made these things had not used them for 6 or 7 months. I thought maybe some Boy Scouts might have made them, but there were no strings or twine to hold them together, and all the branches had been snapped off and not cut with a saw. I did ask the local scoutmaster if they take scouts into this area, and they said no, they do not. I continued to hunt, and 150 feet away from the nests, I discovered a tree. 12 to 14 inches in diameter was broken at the 5 foot tall level. I leaned over against another tree. It looked level, like it was at a 90-degree angle, and smaller trees were placed against it. At first I thought it was a windbreak for cattle, but it was too small, and the wind would go right through it. I looked for tracks of equipment, because 2 of the trees were too large for humans to move, but I found none. I had no idea what this could be. Later that evening, we were stalk hunting again. The sun was going down. I was northwest of camp. I heard what sounded like a guy calling cattle. This guy had massive lungs, possibly a quarter mile away. But at the end of this extended vocal was a loud whoop. The hair on the back of my neck stood up because it sounded apish. It repeated this vocalization another time. When I arrived back at base camp, I asked my friends if they had heard the sounds, and they both had, and wondered what it was. About 3 a.m. that night, I heard something being moved around and knocked over, but I didn't investigate, as I was thinking it was raccoons. In my tree stand the next morning, I heard mumbling south of me. It sounded like Asian foreigners talking. I also heard 2 whistles south of me, down a deer trail. At 3 a.m. that night, I was jolted awake by a loud human-sounding roar. It sounded like a combination of an African lion, the T-Rex from Jurassic Park, and a really pissed-off human. It was a deep guttural sound. It was very angry. I could feel this sound vibrate in my chest. I think it came from the edge of camp. It roared again. Same attitude. I could not believe my hunter friends did not wake up. Then suddenly, from 50 to 100 yards away, came another sound. This was totally unlike the roar. It sounded like a female being murdered, but also incredibly angry. At this point, I woke up my friends, and we waited, but there were no more sounds. I have heard mountain lions since I was 6 years old. This sounded nothing like what I heard that night. It took me an hour to go back to sleep, as thoughts came into my head of the possibility that these things could rip the pop-up camper apart. The next morning, we went about looking for tracks. There was too much leaf litter, though. We came upon a huge plum thicket. As I came around to the southwest side, I smelled a dirty, sweaty skunk smell like we encountered on Friday night. I felt we needed to leave right then, as I felt whatever made the roar the night before was in there, and we would be in danger if we stayed or pressed into the thicket. We packed up and headed home. I was uncomfortable and ready to get out of there. At the time, I had no experience with Bigfoot, and only came to realize these events were Bigfoot related when I heard the extended whoop vocalization. I had heard Paul Harvey speak about such encounters on the radio years ago, telling about stories from the 3-county area of Dewey, Roger Mills, and Ellis counties. I didn't talk about this weekend with anybody for almost 30 years. The following is a BFRO investigator's follow-up report. I met with the witness in January and was taken to the general area of the sighting. I will also be speaking to one of the other men who was on this camping weekend. The witness is a lifelong hunter and outdoorsman who has raised cattle and exotics. He knows his wildlife. This weekend changed his outlook regarding animals in his part of the world. The witness believes the hunters encountered a family group that contained at least 2 smaller individuals based on the nestling area he found. He also feels the mumbling they heard when in their tree stands were made by males, as the voices were so deep in nature. The witness played the whoop vocalization from Ron Moorhead's website for me and said it is very close to what he heard, except that what he heard was a loud, long, extended vocalization that ended with a whoop. The creature vocalized twice. In regard to the roaring vocalization, he has not been able to find any recording that compares to the sound he heard that night. People may ask why the witness didn't take photographs of the nests and other tree structures, but understand it was 1983 and the witness had no idea what these structures were and had never seen anything like them. Cell phones were not in use at the time. This weekend profoundly changed the way the witness viewed the area and made him far more aware of his surroundings. He continued to hunt after his experience, but never went back to that location again, even though he had been hunting it for 7 years. The Black Kettle National Grasslands is located in Roger Mills County, Oklahoma, and Hemp Hill County, Texas. It contains 31,286 acres and consists of about 100 tracts of land interspaced with privately owned ranch land. It is located in the mixed grass prairie region. The terrain is characterized by sandy and red slate hills, in addition to grassland and oak brush. The creek bottoms are wooded with cottonwood, elm, and hackberry. Wildlife includes white-tailed deer, turkey, and quail. The Washita River flows through the grassland. Other water sources include springs, stock tanks, and ponds. This area is sparsely populated, contains washes, draws, thickets, shin oak, and tall grasses.